Right. So here we are back to our channel. Welcome, guys. And welcome to my interview, my friend, my sister from another country. Yes. And this is Yetunde. So we're going to be bringing her, like I promised you guys, we're going to have as many people that still live with sickle cell and those that don't have sickle cell anymore because of a bone marrow transplant. We're going to bring awareness to that in this page. And that's why we're going to have now our first interview with Yetunde. And hi, Yetunde.
Hi everyone. Good to
Yes.
be so excited to be with you.
Yes, yes. So we're gonna let you introduce yourself first, and then after that we'll go from there.
Hi everyone. My name is Yetunde Felix Uku. I had my half-matched bone marrow transplant in 2000 August 2009. I before then had a pretty intense battle with sickle cell that kind of disrupted my life. Lots of pain, lots of hospital admissions, and the bone marrow transplant opportunity came up for me at Johns Hopkins when I think it was what a lot of people would say was like rock bottom. There was nothing
Yeah.
else. I had
Mm-hmm.
all the things, and I just was, because it was a high stress time in my life because I was trying to go to law school. The high levels of stress made my illness the worst it had ever been. And so I remember when the opportunity for the transplant even was just a discussion, and I just remember thinking, I don't care what the risks are,
Hmm.
it's got to be better than what I'm experiencing now. So let's just do it. And
Exactly.
um,
And you're
about
from Nigeria originally, right?
originally from Nigeria, yes.
Yes.
And
So
so
let's start from the beginning. So how was it like, and how did you find out, or was it you were growing and your parents told you you had sickle cell? How did
uh,
all of that start?
funny enough, I actually remember the appointment. Some children can have latent memories, and I just remember the appointment. And it was Dr. Michael Darden, and I just remember hearing the word sickle cell for the first time. And I was a little kid. I think I was like 5 years old,
Um,
um, and I knew something was weird because I had never seen, from what I remember, that feeling of devastation and defeat on my mother's face,
right.
uh, because I had been sickly, like always has a fever, always has a cough, always crying, but nobody was able to put the dots together until I was at the age of 5. But I just remember him trying to encourage her and like rubbing her back, like it's going to be okay. Her fetal hemoglobin will carry her through. But then got the diagnosis at 5, and then kind of was okay. Like didn't really have too
It
many
didn't set
hospital.
in, like it didn't, as a kid, you don't feel like this is serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I knew, okay, when it's hot, I get tired. When it's cold, I feel miserable.
Mhm.
I get, I can't play as much as everybody else, but it really didn't start to become a thing until I was like 11, 12, and then 13,
Yes.
getting my menstrual cycle for the first time.
Mhm.
A wrap. It was over. It was
And it
like
set it
that,
all off, started the
set it
pain
all off. Set it
exactly
off. Set
that.
it off. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So that's good that you actually, brought that up because I same, mine, I was 3 years old playing in the doctor's office. So when the doctor said it, I don't think, because I was running around that they thought that a 3-year old actually paid attention. And I did, now I didn't show it until the next day I went to kindergarten. This was in Senegal. And, during our break, I started crying. And then the teacher asked me, well, why are you crying? What's going on? Did somebody hit you? And I said, no, but I think the doctor said that I'm going to die and it's making me sad. Yeah. So, this was like at 3 years old that I was able to tell the teacher. Now, the teacher was confused because she was wondering, well, how come, a 3-year old is saying something like this? Where is this coming from? So we had, our maid come and pick me up. She used to come pick us up every time we would get off of school. And so she told the maid, she was like, well, yeah, she was crying. She said that she's going to die. Why? Like, where's this coming from? So the maid told her, well, yes, yesterday her and her mom went to the doctors for one of her appointments. And unfortunately, they told her with the sickle cell diagnosis, a lot of people don't get to leave past the age of 18. Now, of course, I was 3, so I couldn't like explain all those details, but I knew,
This
the
is
word dying. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's crazy,
Wow.
because like the late.
Yeah, you'd be surprised what sticks in your memory as a child. I don't remember much, but that is one of the strongest memories, from the strongest and earliest memories that I had, is the day that I was diagnosed with sickle cell.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm glad that we're bringing that up because I'm pretty sure a lot of other people with sickle cell have like some type of story similar. Now,
Hmm.
so let's talk about the next step. So when you came and like the steps, for instance, for the transplant, because for us they told us, oh yeah, like you not everybody with sickle cell at the time could have the transplant. You have
Hmm.
certain criteria. So which type of bone marrow transplant did you have first? Let's go for that.
I had the haplo-identical. I had the half matched, and
Yes, so
it
same
was,
as mine. Uh-huh.
yeah, it was part of the research happening at Johns Hopkins around that time.
And you
And
were patient number what at the time?
at the time, I was patient number 6.
Number 6. There you go. And I was patient number 25. So let's talk
Wow.
about you. Yes, I'm like, because of the difference now, patient number 6, and then they got to me patient number 25. So when you went through your process, what were the requirements that they said you had to have in order to have the bone marrow transplant?
Well, for me, it was that balance of you have to be sick enough, but you
Yes.
can't be too sick.
Yes.
Because if you're too sick, then it's going to be too tough on your body.
Mhm.
And I was quickly getting to the place where it's like, you will soon be too sick.
Mhm.
And so it was like a race against time to see if my insurance would approve it, which they didn't. But eventually they did because the doctors wrote letters on my, like, nothing about my transplant was traditional. Like,
Right.
the doctors wrote personal letters to the insurance company. Like, they got involved in ways that they normally wouldn't,
Right.
because for the sake, yes, I think it was about me, but it was for the sake of their research. Like,
Mhm.
at the time I was like, no, she's an ideal patient. She's right in that pocket of, like, she's sick in the ways that we want to see if the transplant can turn her around. So by the time they started testing and my family members were coming back
Mhm.
as half matched, and my younger, I have 2 younger sisters, but my middle younger sister ended up being my match. It
Yeah.
was like, no, we can't let something as silly as insurance prevent us. So they were like writing letters, they
Yeah.
were waiving their own personal doctor fees, they were doing everything that they could.
Mhm.
But the requirements weren't actually that many. It wasn't like I had to. I think at the time
Yeah.
that we started talking about it, I was having one of those transplants. I mean, one of those transfusions where you transfuse everything in your body. Like,
Yes.
I was having one of those where they were taking everything out and
Yep. And
putting,
replacing it.
yeah, and putting
I'm
everything back
gonna
in.
go through that as well because check this out, guys. So I'm gonna add this picture. So this was the picture where Yetunde and we met. I believe this was the first day we met.
I think so. And we
Yes,
got,
with
yes.
my mom. Yes.
Is this Hopkins like cafeteria, or is this, did we go
No,
somewhere
this was
separate?
we went to a restaurant and we met there, yes, in Colombia,
Wow.
I believe. And this, like, where I'm showing there is my pick line. So I remember your scar that you're showing was where your pick line was when you went through your
Mm-hmm.
bone marrow transplant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was crazy. And this was the day, like just like how the transfusions you were saying. So I met you the day before because right after this, the next day, I had like 2 to 3 liters of my sickle cell blood removed. And then that was replaced with like this picture right here. And that was replaced with 2 to 3 liters of blood that actually came from somebody that did not have sickle cell. So that's
Mm-hmm.
all. And this was August 13, actually, this picture. So you and I, we met
Wow.
August 12, yes, in
Ooh, I'm getting
2013.
goosebumps because the story of how we even found each other is also another interesting story.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you want, you can like go ahead and say because
Well,
tell us how did we
I
meet.
just remember I had my transplant, and I eventually, because I just wasn't mentally doing well after the transplant, because I was still very sick after I
Yeah.
got my transplant, I
Mhm.
went to go live in Nigeria. And I remember, I think I checked my spam mail, and I'd been getting these emails for someone for like months. And
Yes,
it
my
was
mom.
this lady, yes, it was this lady who was like on a mission to get in touch with me. She had read
Yes,
the article that I had done for the New York Times, and she like, and this was back then when it wasn't so easy to find people. Now you just type someone's name and
exactly. And
pop
what
up.
year was that?
That
What
was
what
that
year did
had
you
to
have your
have been,
transplant?
what year did you get yours?
I got my transplant in 2013.
Okay, so it
Oh,
must have been 2011 or 12.
Yes, yes. It was
Yeah,
still brand new.
it was
Yes.
still new. So I see these emails and she's like, I'm looking for you. I'm trying to find you.
Yeah,
My daughter is, in discussions to probably have this. I need more information.
exactly.
And you're someone who has exactly what my daughter wants. And so
Yes.
I just remember thinking, who is this person? Because
Yes, my mom. And she's so adamant, like when she wants an answer, she will get it. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I love her. At the time, my pain crisis, we tried hydroxyurea, which wasn't working. Like we tried so many options, with the sickle cell before we went for the transplant, because some of the requirements that they asked me was that, they gave us that big binder where you had to read, into it. And you had to answer some of those questions when they asked you during the conferences we would have. And they said that if you were hospitalized within a 1 year period, at least 3 times, and each of those 3 times you had to be in the hospital 7 days minimum or more, that was one of the requirements for the transplant. Like if you were hospitalized, let's just say less than 7 days, they would not, consider you to be sick enough to have the transplant. So, it was, between like all of that, and we wanted to talk to you to see, because at the time we went to other hospitals. Now, for legality reasons, I know some of these hospitals, but I can't say it here before they tell me anything about it. But we went to other hospitals in DC, in Maryland, and then in Philly. So she did a lot of research, but most of those hospitals, they had the bone marrow transplant where if the transplant failed, you actually ended up dying, unfortunately. So Hopkins was the one that finally, when she found that research, and she was like, wait, this is the only one that if it fails, you get to retry, the patient doesn't die. And that's where she was trying to reach out to you. I remember that.
Yeah, she emailed like consistently for months
Yeah.
before I even thought to check my spam. And
Mhm.
then she left her number, and then I went to phone calls, and she was like, "You have to talk to her. I
Yeah.
want to ask you questions." And like, so, I mean, your mom is a warrior. Your
She's
mom is a fierce
amazing.
advocate.
Honestly, if she wasn't in my life, I don't even think that I would have been cured of sickle cell right now. She's not even
I
part of this interview, but I'm going to show it to her, and I want her to just be surprised when she sees this, because I want it to
oh,
be genuine on her end. Yes.
well, I love you, Miss Elizabeth, because you are such a fierce advocate. And yeah, I saw that from the moment I saw your email in my inbox. Like, I'm like, how did you find me?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did and it
And I
was great.
remember even when the doctors, because at first they kept telling us, no, no, you can't have the transplant. But she was so adamant, and she, went to to war for me, and that's when she started talking to you. She had even found some other patients that also did have the transplant. Now, their transplant was different. One of them, actually, the options was, if this doesn't work, you do understand that you're going to pass away. And they said yes, and they went for it. So hopefully I'll also get her to do an interview later with us as well. But yeah.
Interesting thing about that is that I remember them saying something like that. Like they
Yes.
told me the chances of death, and it was a very high number.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was like, well, this life that I'm living right now is pretty close to death.
It
So let's just
is.
go for it. I'll take my
Go for it.
chances.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that binder that you're talking about. The binder was thick. It had
Thick.
all, and my mom, I gave it to my mom. My mom's a pharmacist. And the first thing my mom said is, no, like, what? You may not understand everything that's in this binder, but I'm a medical person. And this binder is like, it's like basically death, 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 death,
Exactly.
death. And I said, Mom, what life do I have
What
now?
else? What else is there with sickle cell? All that pain. I mean, I was also ready to just, gamble it all. I was like, even if death is the end of this, I'm ready. I'm tired.
Exactly.
This is the
Whether I
last.
leave by death or this thing, it takes the thing out, I got to get out of here. And so
Yep.
I understand. I understand. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Awesome. So now, let's go with the steps of your transplant, because mine, I had 7 days of chemo, 1 day of total body radiation. And then on the ninth day, we did the bone marrow that I received from my brother. And then after that, we did 2 more days of chemo. So how was yours, since you were patient number 6?
So much longer. So
Yes,
much
yes, I know.
longer.
I know the memories.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating seeing how everything just got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And now people are having like little weekend transplants. And I'm like, what? I was in
Yes.
the hospital for 4 months.
Yes.
Yeah, mine was interrupted because I just kept having crises. Like I got admitted to start the process, then I got this massive infection that almost like killed me because it started off with like a cavity,
Oh, wow.
But then,
It was a
our
deep
immune systems
infection,
are
and then it just, oh
so
gosh.
then like my face swelled and it was going to my brain and there was all these, so that delayed it. And
Mhm.
then my family at the time was all over the world. So even
Yes.
just testing my family, it was like trying to find a facility in Nigeria that would successfully test my dad, get the results back to here. To
Yes.
get somebody tested just took forever. And then I was
Was
in
your
law
dad your
school.
donor?
No, my dad wasn't my donor, but they tested everybody.
Yes, yes. Who ended up
And
being your donor?
one of my two younger sisters.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remember I was in law school and I was like, hey, so can we do this in the summer so I can get back to law school?
Yes. You were more worried
And
about
I
your
was like,
too.
can we squeeze this in over the summer really quickly?
Mhm.
And then insurance just took forever. And
Mhm.
so there was that time where I was ready. Everything was ready, but then the insurance was like, slow down. You say this is going to cost us how much? And I remember one of the letters that Dr. Robert Brodsky wrote was like,
Mhm.
he got them to do a breakdown. He's like, on average, she's in the hospital needing a private room and needing ICU and needing all of this about this many times a month. That's this many times a year. And if she continues on this trajectory, which as the illness progresses, it will cause more and more damage
Mhm.
over her lifetime. She will be projected to cost you as an insurance company this much money.
Mhm.
That is a very large amount compared to this transplant, which, yes, is expensive. But this transplant versus a lifetime of her being an insurance
Like sick,
patient
because it would cost you
required.
more, like
Yeah,
for her to be hospitalized for the rest of her lifetime versus
exactly.
just fixing it one time, done deal.
Exactly. And so that was the thing that they were like approved. And so once it was approved, everything moved really quickly. They were like, I remember I got the call in April that I was approved, and I like made a video, and I was just so excited. I got the call that I was approved in April and then proceeded to get sick and
Yes,
didn't have the transplant until August.
until August.
So,
Right. So yours
and
was in
then
August too. Mine was in August too. Mine was August 23rd,
our
2013.
anniversaries are very close to each other. Yeah,
Yes.
I was August 28th. And another thing that delayed was that they weren't sure because of the Cytoxan
Yes.
and the levels that they were going to have to use and the like how long I was going to have to use it. If they
Exactly.
would if they would take away my ability to have children. So
Mhm.
one of the things that delayed is that they were trying to do egg retrieval so that they could keep my immune system.
Yeah,
Um,
that's one of the side effects of the transplant, by the way, for the people out there listening. They did tell us that if you go through this process because of the chemo radiation, you're less likely to have a child in the future. Now, however, because you were patient number 26 and I was number 25 in that same study, they did say that the amount of chemo that they gave to each patient by the time they got to me lessened, and same as also the radiation. So the stuff that they did for you, by the time they got to me, number 25, it was a lesser amount of all of those toxins, but still
yeah,
the risk was there. And they told me the same as well. Now, I did not
yeah,
have my eggs retrieved like you did, but, I just said, "Here, hold on, let's just, go with this transplant. This is the goal. Let's do it. Kids and
yeah.
all that. I'll talk about it later in life." Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about, I don't remember the exact days, but I know being patient number 6, like, and I was in that so there was a batch of 10 of us
Yes.
that they finally started with, but insurance said no, 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 no to about 4. So then it dropped down to that
Six.
smaller number 6.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and I remember the point was egg retrieval,
Mhm.
but the window kept getting smaller and smaller because I kept just getting sick. And they were like, rather than egg retrieval, let's do a oophorectomy and just take the entire ovary. So they took the entire ovary in a surgery
Mhm.
that, again, insurance didn't want to pay for.
Right.
Um, but eventually they did, and the doctor waived his fees. They waived they waived so many things just to, like, for the sake of the research, like, let's just keep going.
Yes.
So I got my ovary cryo preserved,
Mhm.
and then my sister was available. I was available. I was sick, but I didn't have any you have to wait for all the infections to clear, because when you're getting a transplant, what they're doing is wiping your immune system out
Of
completely. You don't have
course, the
no bone marrow.
neutropenic
You
period
have no.
to get to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I started the process, I want to say, of the chemotherapy
Mhm.
in like early August.
Mhm.
Had some hiccups where they had to stop,
Mhm.
but finally, like, the whole radiation process, all of that was like in mid-August. And then August 28th was the day that my sister had her donation. And you bring it upstairs, the
Yeah.
blood, the bone marrow upstairs, fresh, like it's still warm, fresh out
Yes,
of my
I showed it to them
body.
in one of my videos. I'm like, I know now. I showed them exactly what my brother's marrow looked like. So I know, like, when they can go back to the videos, they'll watch that on the channel as well.
It's
Now,
crazy because
so with
I
the
never knew what bone marrow looked like. I
me,
always thought
me
it would
neither.
look
I used to think
different.
it was white, like
Same.
when
I
you
thought it would
eat
be a different color.
bone. Yes.
Yeah.
What I thought. Yeah. Now, so with the chemo and radiation, so your hair fell out. You had the nausea, vomit, of course, the side effects of the chemo, all of that wiping you away. But then after that, everything grew back like natural, right?
Yeah, it was so interesting because I lost my hair. I don't know why I thought I would like beat the odds and my hair wouldn't fall.
Same. I did too. I was like, you know what? No, my hair is strong enough. It got this, but no, it
I
fell.
know. I was like, this is like the hair that Lil Wayne speaks of. Tougher, nothing's tougher than Nigerian hair. I said, no,
Yes.
got my braids done. What? And then I remember the first day that whole braid just came out of my head, and the process of shaving my head. And I think I do still have that picture, so I'll send it to you.
Yes, please do.
The first time that I got my hair shaved, and then the wig consultation. And it was funny because all those organizations that like collect hair for women who, and they tried all those wigs on me, and I said, oh, so nobody black donates to these wigs. Okay, it's cool.
Yes.
So I saw that they were gonna have
You
me.
saw the disparity in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, this is more black people need to know about the wig donations for people, going through chemotherapy, hair loss. Yeah. And like it was so itchy, and so I said, you know what, I'm gonna rock the bald. And so I just started like
same. I rocked the baldness. Now I remember when I used to be bald, like going to sleep at night was like terrible because you would wake up with your pillow soaked. You would think that with you not having hair, your head would just be dry, but no, it would sweat, it would soak at night, but it was easy to wash, and I rocked it. I said, you know what, this is what's going on. I have to accept it, and that's what it is. Yeah.
And so then it came back, but then it came back like it belonged to a white girl. Like it was like wavy, it was blonde.
So the first hair, yes, the first hair was
through a lot of changes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I honestly still feel like 15 years later, my hair is permanently different than it was before the transplant. Like it's not in a negative way, but it has never been the same.
It has never been the same. Yeah. Either. Now, what else did change? Did your blood type change?
Yes, and I thought that was so fascinating because I don't know my blood type anymore because it's been my whole life. Yeah. And now every now and then I go to what's our blood type again? Because
I tell my brother that I'm like, what's our blood type again? Like because blood type is going to change. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
tricky because the ironic part was I don't know what it is, but I was the universal donor. Is that O positive?
Yes, O positive. Yep.
Yeah, I was O positive before, which I just thought was ironic because I'm a universal donor for blood that nobody would ever want.
Yes. I know. And what else did you say now that we're 15 years for yours? What lasting side effects would you say came either from the chemo or from the transplant that you noticed, but you're saying in your daily life, oh, it's okay, I can live with this better than sickle cell any day?
The interesting part is there's days when I have pains and I go into a panic because it'll be a pain exactly like it was back in the sickle cell days, like in my legs or my hips or something. And I'll just be like, is it back?
Is it back? Is it back? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then flying still causes me to be a little bit achy in the ways that it used to when I was at sickle cell. And I just think my sweet little immune system, as strong as she is still a relatively weak immune system.
Yes, yeah. It's 15 years later. For me, it's 12 years later. Sometimes I also get sick, get in the hospital. But anything that they find, they still say, oh, these are things that people under 10 years old get or under 15. And I'm like, what? Yeah.
And then I got shingles afterwards.
Same. I got shingles.
Yeah. And it was only after the transplant.
Sorry, what did you say? I think ended up having shingles because Dr. I think did say that. Yeah.
And after the transplant, he was like, oh, yeah, the likelihood of that is very high. I said, did you not want to mention? Shingles is the most painful thing. I said, there's not many things more painful than sickle cell, but shingles?
Shingles was nerves and the shooting sharp pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So I
Did you
think my immune system
mm-hmm.
has been, it wasn't strong while I had sickle cell. And even though I've had a transplant, you know, sometimes I was having like 10 colds a year.
Yes.
And it was only when I asked other people, they were like, yeah, only about 2 to 3 colds are normal in a year. And I'm like, oh, I have a cold every month. So I
Yes.
think my immune system is still just not as strong as the average person.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, we don't complain about anything because
Right.
the fact that I'm here
And
and
we
that
were one of the chosen ones. Millions
yeah.
around the world are still asking me, well, how did you do it? I think, this is expensive. You guys were lucky. Maybe you guys are rich. And I'm like, no, we were not rich. We had help with the insurance. For people, hopefully in other countries, we're hoping that there will be some nonprofit organizations, maybe that might see these videos or other people's videos, hopefully that will start now helping. I actually do have an upcoming interview or like a video I have to do for an event for sickle cell on April 19th. So that's actually also a nonprofit organization. So we're hoping that throughout this, we can raise awareness, and hopefully it won't be unachievable for other people in other countries to also have it done,
And my belief is that no procedure that was expensive in 2009 should still be as expensive in 2025.
Exactly.
Like
You
you
have
guys
more
have got,
opportunities.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the
More
amount of
resources.
therapy has gone down. The amount of time required to be hospitalized has gone down.
Yep.
So many of the things that were experimental and they were figuring it out in our protocol, even just by the time they got to your protocol, it was different.
It
And so
was.
I think it's just like anything. Like now we're talking about CRISPR or gene therapy. That's all so expensive right now.
I
But
know.
just by virtue of of technology improving, next year should be cheaper, and the year after it should be cheaper. And so I'm hoping that the immense cost that was presented and that was on the table in 2009 is not the cost anymore, because who can afford that?
Yes.
No.
Yes. No one. No one. And I wasn't rich. My family was not rich, so, but we were still, lucky to have it. Now the other thing, did you also end up having graft versus host disease?
I'm so grateful to God that was never, like, that's the thing that you stay vigilant about.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what's the name of that anti-rejection medicine that you take. It starts with a P.
That's a very good question, because it was, I used to take 23 pills a day. Like, so,
Yeah.
and then, when you're going through chemo, like sometimes I used to have confusion, I used to forget things. So those 23 pills, I do not have like a memory of those.
Prograf.
Okay. Yes. So you got Prograf for you.
I remember when they said I could go off the Prograf.
Yes.
Because that was the one that was like the big fight against graft versus host.
Uh-huh.
And when they said I could titrate down and eventually stop the Prograf, I wept, because I was like, I made it.
You made it. Yes.
Like the graft versus host disease, that is such a big threat that is affecting people all the time who get transplants, didn't do to me what has done to so many people who get this transplant.
Yes, because I had it, and it was, for me, we actually thought it was just still a side effect of the chemo. Like for me, my stomach, was so swollen, extended, and everything, and it was firm. I wasn't able to even eat or even drink water, even a sip of water. By the time it got down to my stomach, it was like these twisty little pain. It hurt so bad. And for 2 months, my intake started decreasing. I started eating less, drinking less. Then next thing you know, we went to one of my appointment with Dr. Brodsky, and I'm over there every 5 minutes. I have the vomiting bag, and I'm over there throwing up every 5 minutes, throwing up the appointment. So he was like, wait a minute, you've been going through this for how long? And I said, well, it's been like almost 2 months now. He was like, what? And I said, well, I thought it was a side effect of the chemo, and so did my mom, but here we are. So he was like, no, you're not going back home. We're admitting you now. So after the 4 months of the transplant, I had to be again readmitted for another 2.5 months, where they use steroids, to bring down the inflammation. I had to be NPO, no eating, no drinking, just because of how painful it was every time I tried to introduce something to my body, So it was rough. Then I lived off of Ensure once I started being able to eat a little bit. Yes, the Ensure days. Yep, I lived off of Ensure for a bit. Yeah. So
and I remember graft versus host was the stomach lining was specifically susceptible to that because of how quick is there.
It was
Yeah.
so bad. I mean, like, I don't even want to be graphic in these videos, but it was like it was shedding, and
Hmm.
they had to do an endoscopy and a colonoscopy still, and they still saw how raw it was when with the results.
Mm.
Yes, and I kept telling them, I was like, yeah, like this is not even like a regular bowel movement. This is just tissue lining just coming out, and it was.
Mm.
So I'm glad that I also made it through that, because that was one of the big side effects. That shingles from the bone marrow transplant for me. So for you, you had shingles. You were able, thank God, to not have graft versus host disease. So what
But you
message?
know what? But you know what I did have?
Yeah.
I had crises for 2 more years.
2 more years. Mine was, I was gonna get to that, because mine was a year and 7 months later, or a year and 8 months later, that I found out. And I was like, wait a minute, when was the last time that I had a pain crisis? Because
Hmm.
I was in the garden like next to my house, and I took a deep breath, but for the first time I could feel the oxygen actually flowing into my body in 21 years. And I got scared. I was like, wait a minute, what is that? To me, it wasn't normal, because I
Yeah.
always felt like somebody was like strangling me. So for
Yeah.
you, how long did it take? You said for 2 years until the pain crisis stopped.
Yeah. I remember I was in the hospital in 2011. I was depressed. I
Wow.
was depressed because I was like, who gets a transplant
Uh-huh.
and is still in the hospital with a pain crisis? And then I was like, I'm a not a hypochondriac, but I was like, I'm imagining it
Yeah,
because there's no blood, there's no sickled blood to cause the pain. So how am I here, right?
right. You
And
thought it was all psychological. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, oh, so have I been, have I been making it up this whole time? And
Mhm.
then I was like trying to go back to law school, and I was trying to I was like, I'm trying to start my life. It's been delayed enough, and here I am, had the transplant, still in the hospital. Like
Oh,
those admissions after my transplant were the hardest because it just felt like
yeah.
failed.
It
Like
plays in
technically
your
it's
mental
okay.
health. Yes. And it makes you feel like, oh, did this actually work like the doctor said? Because so for you, they did the chimerism test to see if actually it did work.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
when
mm-hmm.
did they say
I
that?
was showing it's fully grafted.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so what? And so that was the first time I understood the concept of like nerve damage.
Yeah.
These nerves have been firing for my whole life, my
Hmm.
whole life. And so, you know, it just was a mind game of understanding like, yes, this crisis is real. The causes behind it might be a little bit different, but the pain you are feeling is not imagined. You
Hmm.
are actually in a lot of pain. And so it was like you said, I remember being in the hospital in 2011. And I think after that last one, I was like, you know what? I'm going back to Nigeria for my mental health, just to see what, the environment does for my physical health. And it was in Nigeria that I feel like the fullness of my healing fully manifested. Because I looked up, when I went to Nigeria, I went with a full suitcase, fluids, IV things. I
Yeah,
went
you
with
were
a
ready.
full arsenal, because I didn't know what I was like. Maybe this is my life. I'm just gonna have less crisis, or I'm just gonna have less pain. And then I looked up and I was like, the suitcase is gathering dust. I haven't opened it. I
Yeah.
haven't been in
So
pain.
all those medications and IV fluids you brought, you never opened it up.
I never opened it, and it became like
Wow.
I remember looking. I had the fentanyl patches. I
Ooh.
still I still keep an expired box of fentanyl patches just to remember how much pain I was in.
You were in, yes.
I still have I remember there was a time where I was like 400 micrograms, like 4 big whole stickers on my back.
Yes.
And I just had the whole arsenal, and I was like, I haven't touched it.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
But it was like that tentative, like,
Like
because sickle
just
cell does
ready.
that to you. You'll think you're okay, and
Mhm.
then someone's pulling the rug out from under you. So I
Yeah.
just kept waiting for like the next one, and then I was like 6 months, 8 months, a year,
Mhm.
and so like you said, I finally started to breathe. Like, wait, am I okay? Am I
So you
okay?
felt that too. You felt that oxygen finally going to your body, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I thought I was crazy. I was like, wait a minute, is this just me? So I'm glad to
yeah,
hear this.
yeah. No, I breathe like because in a lot of times, even regular deep breathing, you're not able to do without pain.
Yes.
If you've had any acute chest in your life,
Yes.
your
It's
whole
painful.
situation. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So man, I can breathe deeper. And I was like, maybe it's the Nigerian air. I don't know what this is, but I started to feel healed
Yeah.
in 2011, 2012, right when you were starting to go through yours. So I remember
Mm-hmm.
I felt like such a ray of hope towards you because you were in the darkest parts while
Yes.
I was just coming to like
Coming
the
out
bright.
of it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, but you uplifted me. You were one of the people that I spoke to at the time that gave me so much hope that I'm like, okay, there's an end, to this, at the end of the tunnel, there's light, there's a new life, and honestly, coming from Africa, we have still so many Africans that are struggling with this. We have people that are here, African Americans, that don't even have the opportunity or the chance to get the transplant because they're also being told no, they are not candidates. So I also want to clear that it's not just, like Africans that they're saying no to, they're also saying no to Americans here as well.
One of my small little advocacy ways is I have now helped or directed at least 4 people towards getting their transplants. Wow. People that the doctors have said no, people that didn't know where to go, people that don't know how to even start, like, because we both had our transplants at Johns Hopkins,
right? And
people are like, but how do I get to Hopkins? And that's the question I had. I was
like, they did ask me that. So do you want to touch up a little bit, at least so people can watch this? Because they did ask me, well, how can we get help? So what did you do for these people?
Well, so, Dr. Robert Brodsky will always live literally right here.
Me too. He's like my savior. I'm like, oh my God.
Listen, that man is an angel who just happens to be a doctor, right?
Yep.
And so for some of them, it was as simple as a call to him or an email to him. And when I tell you, I emailed him and he answered as quickly as if it was a text. I said,
exactly.
The head of oncology is answering me. And so for some of them, it was as simple as a call to him and then just getting them in the system. And like, I know you're busy, but whoever you can send them to. For some of them, it was that simple. And then for some of them, it was just like, no, tell your doctor this. Mm-hmm. When your doctor is telling you you're not sick enough, tell them that, so for some of them, it was advocate it within your own system, because I've met folks at Kaiser Permanente and like, I don't have the ability to drive up to Hopkins. I'm in Virginia. So it's like, no, go to Inova and say this.
Yes. So they reached out to Dr. Brodsky themselves.
Yeah. So some people have reached out to Dr. Brodsky.
Yes.
Someone had their transplant, I think, just a month ago. And
this past month?
Yes, this past month. Like from the time that I introduced them to the time that they had the transplant was a small window of maybe like 4 months. Like that's how quickly they moved through the pipeline, which it went from this.
This is how with Dr. Brodsky though, right?
Yes, at Hopkins.
But Dr. Brodsky, I thought that he left Hopkins. Is he back?
So it's not that he's left. I just think he's like in administration now. Like I don't think he's actively seeing patients. I don't think. So he was just
have to give me his recent contact information because I also need to reach out to him like in private as well. So after this, definitely do. So they were able to reach out to the doctor. It's himself. So that's why I'm like, yeah, we need to bring this up. That way people know how to reach out. So again, they have to reach out to their doctors. Their doctors also can reach out to Dr. Brodsky, or they can also email him as well.
Yeah, but even if you don't go to Dr. Brodsky, so here are the things that I've heard. My doctor is telling me that I'm not sick enough.
Yeah.
And just in general, I feel like Black people, women, minorities are not listened to by their doctors. And I think I've just encouraged a handful of people to say, okay, but if I was, what would the first steps be? Like, you cannot be the gate between me and this thing that I want to experience more. If you're not going to help me, is there another doctor who would, hematologist that you would recommend so that I can have a conversation? When you start showing that kind of resistance and pushback, they're like, okay, all right, wait.
Let's work with you, right?
It sounds like you're talking about.
Would you go with another doctor? Or also get on Google, like now all the answers are also online,
Right. So Googling, because now you can Google bone marrow transplant Maryland or bone marrow transplant Virginia, and the clinics will come up. So not everybody has the ability to go to Hopkins. Some people, it's like, that's not in my insurance. I can't do that. That's like, I'm in this insurance house. And so I'm like, okay, great. Within your insurance, let's see who we can find. And so under my guidance, people have switched oncologists. Like, okay, this oncologist is thinking that I should just keep getting a transfusion every week.
And once your antibodies change with those transfusions, you can't even be a candidate anymore for the transplant.
And I experienced that. I experienced a little bit of people thinking, why do you want the transplant when you can just do these other things?
Yeah, same,
And
same. That's why my mom fought for me too. Yeah.
it's not, I don't hold against the people who felt like me getting a transplant was their failure.
Yeah.
I don't hold that against them, but I just got really stubborn and
Yeah.
really dogged, and sometimes that's what I instill in the people that come across that who are like, I heard you had this transplant. I just instill a sense of stubbornness and doggedness, which I think you have to develop having going through life with sickle cell, because you know, you have to come across nurses who are going to treat you some kind of way. You're going to have to go to hospitals where people who don't know you are who you are and think you're a drug seeker.
Exactly. They love to label sickle cell people as drug seekers, and I hate that notion. Like, I just hate the belief.
That's a full on conversation that will go on for, you know, we could talk about that. This whole interview could be just about that, you know, and I've done
that. Don't worry, we're gonna have more about this coming on. So I'm like, this is why I'm like, okay, let's see how you doing 15 years later. And so right now, what would you say as a last message overall to our audience?
I would say two things. As beautiful as the transplant is, and I encourage and advise people, if they can try to get it, if they can try to find information about it, to get it, please do, because it's a game changer. It's a life changer. I feel like my life started in 2000. Right? It did not start when
I feel like,
started.
I'm only 12 years old. Yes.
Listen, I'm out here just a teenager. Okay.
Yes.
I just got here. That's what I feel like. So that's one. But also two, and I spoke about this at a conference recently, even though the bone marrow transplant takes away the physical pain, the effects of sickle cell and living with such a, you know, traumatic, painful illness are lifelong.
Yes.
Right?
It's like that PTSD.
So I technically don't have sickle cell anymore, but the effects of sickle cell will always be part of my life.
Exactly. It's PTSD. You know, you don't
exactly.
Yes. Like sometimes I'll wake up from a nightmare and I'm like, oh my God, am I in pain? Like I've woken up where I'm crying, and then I wake up and like, oh, I was in pain in my dreams. But hold on. I'm awake. I'm touching my body. I'm like, oh wait, I'm not in pain. I'm okay. You know, so that PTSD always stays with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it takes away a lot of things. You get your life back in a major way, but it is not a walk in the park after a bone marrow transplant. You know, I know a lot of people who have a transplant still have crises. Someone just got admitted just a few weeks ago, like in a graft versus host kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, the numbers are off, and you know, pain is coming back, infections. So it's not. I know for some people for whom it just didn't work. Like went through all the things I went through, and it just didn't work. The crises never stopped. It wasn't
their transplant was rejected in other way.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, you know, I would like to say those two things, that get it if you can, but also know that it's a lifelong journey, no matter what happens, whether you have the transplant or not. It's a lifelong journey. You know, I'm still unpacking the trauma from sickle cell 10, 15, all these many years later, things that I only have the mental space to do now that I'm not in survival mode. Because, you know, having an illness that can strike at any time like that, that disrupts your life like that, that is so painful. Like you said, it causes PTSD. And so learning how to, when you have PTSD, it doesn't just disappear because you're not at war anymore. Like, you know, right?
Yeah. My husband is from the army, and he did 17 years and he has it. And that's totally different. So for us with this disease, I lived with it for 22 years. You lived with it for 28 years. So that's longer than we've even lived longer since the transplant.
Exactly. Right. Yes. Right. I've had sickle cell way longer than I haven't had sickle cell. For me, the balance is 29 and now 15.
Yes.
So, yeah,
I think the whole journey, you know, it takes courage. Number one, it takes faith. You have to have faith in God. The doctors and nurses are awesome. They're always going to be there. I'm a nurse myself. I'm always going to be there for my patients. But at some point, there will be a point where the doctors and nurses can really, you know, help with certain things. And that's where, you know, I found my faith in God. You know, I got closer and I prayed. So it takes, you know, faith. It takes courage. It takes, also the ability to say, you know what, if I was to be given like an ultimatum, this is my ultimatum. If I want to have the transplant, I'm going to do that. And even if it means, okay, it's gonna be rejected, I'm okay with it. If the transplant you're choosing says you're gonna die now in this age, I don't know why anybody would choose an option where you're dying instead of choosing the ones where you won't die. It just fails and you can restart. Then you choose the one that works for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's also one closing message that I can say also to people. Keep faith. We know that it's going to be a lifelong journey. It won't happen overnight. Even for us that have been cured, it took weeks, months, years. For me, it took a year and a half. For you, it took about 2 years before you finally notice those last pain crisis. So it's you got to give yourself time and
Yeah.
patience. Yep.
And so the last thing that I would say is that at one point the transplant did feel like this far, far, far away thing. I'm
Yeah.
reading about it in newspaper articles and it's on the news.
Yeah.
But just be encouraged that it is not that far away. It is like in a hospital in your town.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, it's in a town. Like, for the first time I met people who are from really small towns and they're like, no, it's not in my town. And they have to go to a lot bigger like city to
Yes.
get it.
It will require traveling. Yes.
It's not this thing that's like only for rich people far away. I could never get it. It is available. You just have to
Fight,
press
to
and
advocate for
put a little
yourself. If you
pressure.
can't
Yeah.
advocate because you're too sick, let the next your next family member that you trust advocate for you. Because there will be times where you're going to be in so much pain that all you want to do is take your pain medicine, relax, let everybody leave you alone while you deal with that. So you need somebody else to talk for you.
Yes.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
Yetunde, we thank you so much for joining the channel. I cannot thank you enough. We're gonna do more of this. And yes, please let those other people know that had the transplant as well. If they're willing to do this interview as well, talk about their own bone marrow transplant, I would love to as well.
Done.
Yeah.